In the frozen expanse of the Ural Mountains in Russia lies a place shrouded in mystery, Dyatlov Pass. Named after Igor Dyatlov, the leader of a doomed hiking expedition, this remote and desolate stretch has become infamous for one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. What happened to the 9 experienced hikers who perished there in 1959 remains a question that haunts the annals of history. The story begins on January 23, 1959, when a group of 10 university students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on a skiing and hiking expedition to the mountains. The team was young, skilled, and eager to conquer the challenge. Their goal was to reach Otorten Mountain, a journey that required navigating the harsh, snow-covered wilderness. One member, Yuri Yudin, fell ill early on and had to turn back, a twist of fate that would save his life. The remaining 9 pressed forward, unaware of the fate awaiting them. Diaries and photographs found later show their journey through the freezing wilderness, laughing, and bonding, oblivious to the horrors that lay ahead. On February 1, they pitched their tent on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, a name eerily translated by the local Mansi people as Dead Mountain. When the group failed to return by their scheduled date, a search party was launched. What rescuers found at Dyatlov Pass defied logic and sparked decades of speculation. The hikers' tent was discovered first. It had been slashed open from the inside, as if they had fled in panic. Their belongings, including warm clothes and boots, were left behind in the freezing cold. Footprints led away from the tent, barefoot and scattered, as if the hikers had run for their lives. The bodies were found over the following weeks. The first 2 were discovered near the edge of the forest, dressed only in underwear, huddled near a makeshift fire. 3 more were found further up the slope, as if they had been trying to return to the tent. It was the remaining 4 that baffled investigators the most. Found months later in a ravine, their injuries were grotesque and inexplicable. 1 had a fractured skull, 2 had broken ribs, and 1 was missing her tongue and eyes. Yet, there were no external wounds to explain the trauma, as if something had crushed them with an unimaginable force. The official investigation concluded that the hikers had died of a compelling natural force. But what could that possibly mean? Theories exploded in the years that followed, ranging from the mundane to the supernatural. Some suggested an avalanche had forced the hikers to flee in panic, but the lack of significant snow deposits contradicted this. Others blamed infrasound, a natural phenomenon caused by wind, which could induce feelings of dread and panic. Then there were the more chilling theories, that the hikers had stumbled into a military testing zone, falling victim to secret experiments. Some claimed they had encountered a yeti or been attacked by extraterrestrial beings. Locals spoke of a curse tied to the land. The Mansi people, who had lived in the area for generations, believed the mountain to be sacred and dangerous. According to their legends, spirits of the mountain punished those who trespassed. The hikers' tragic fate seemed to give weight to these old stories. Adding to the mystery were reports of glowing orange orbs in the sky around the time of the incident. Witnesses from nearby areas claimed to have seen these strange lights, leading some to believe the hikers had been caught in a UFO encounter or an experimental weapon test. The hikers' skin and clothing were reportedly discolored, with some suggesting radiation exposure, though no official explanation was ever provided. In recent years, attempts have been made to revisit the case. In 2020, Russian authorities reopened the investigation, concluding that an avalanche was the most likely explanation. However, this theory still fails to address the strange injuries, the slashed tent, or the eerie reports of glowing lights. the Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the world's most enduring mysteries, with no definitive answers. It has inspired books, documentaries, and even films, each trying to piece together the puzzle of what happened on that frozen slope. But no matter how many theories emerge, the truth seems as elusive as ever. To this day, Dyatlov Pass stands as a chilling reminder of how the wilderness can be both beautiful and deadly. For those who dare to venture near, the winds that howl through the pass carry whispers of the 9 lives lost and the secrets buried in the snow. The mountain, cloaked in its haunting silence, seems to guard its truths fiercely, leaving the world to wonder what really happened to Igor Dyatlov and his team. Some believe the answers lie in science, others in the supernatural. But one thing is certain, Dyatlov Pass is more than just a place. It is a mystery, a curse, and a chilling testament to the unknown forces that may lurk in the coldest corners of the earth. In the heart of Shanghai, amidst the bustling streets and neon lights, there stands a forgotten relic of the city's glorious past, the old Shanghai Opera House. Once a grand theater that hosted some of the most famous performances in China, it now sits mostly abandoned, its grandeur slowly fading with time. However, despite its dilapidated condition, the Opera House is far from empty. Over the years, eerie tales have circulated about strange occurrences within the building, with many believing that the ghost of a tragic actress haunts its halls. Staff members and visitors alike have reported ghostly sightings, sudden cold drafts, and other unsettling phenomena. But who is the ghost, and what tragedy keeps her bound to the Opera House? The story begins in the early 1930s, when the Shanghai Opera House was at the peak of its popularity. The theater was known for its elaborate performances, rich cultural history, and grand architecture. It was a place where the elite of Shanghai would gather to watch breathtaking operas, ballets, and plays. Among the many talented performers was a young actress named Li Mei, known for her stunning beauty and unparalleled talent. She was beloved by the audience and quickly became one of the brightest stars of the Shanghai opera scene. Li Mei's rise to fame was meteoric, but her success came with its own set of challenges. As a young woman in the spotlight, she faced pressure to maintain her image both on and off the stage. Yet, despite the stress of her career, Li Mei seemed to thrive. She had a promising future ahead of her, with more roles and more fans eager to see her perform. But then, something tragic happened during one of her most anticipated performances. It was the night of a grand opera, a sold-out event with high-profile guests from all over China. Li Mei was to take center stage, performing a pivotal role in the show. The evening was filled with excitement and anticipation, and the opera house was brimming with energy. But in the middle of her performance, something went horribly wrong. According to accounts from those who were there, Li Mei suddenly collapsed on stage, her body convulsing in a strange and violent manner. Panic spread through the audience as the performers scrambled to help her, but it was too late. Li Mei died on stage, in front of hundreds of stunned onlookers. The cause of her death was never fully explained. Some believed it was a sudden heart attack, while others speculated that it was a curse brought on by the intense pressures of her career. Regardless of the cause, her death left a deep scar on the opera house, and her once promising future was tragically cut short. After the performance, the theater was never quite the same. The vibrancy of the opera house faded, and a chilling atmosphere settled over the building. It didn't take long for rumors to spread that Li Mei's spirit had not left the theater. Staff members began to report strange happenings inside the building, especially during the late hours of the night when the opera house was empty. Cold drafts would suddenly sweep through the hall, despite the fact that the windows and doors were tightly shut. Strange, unexplainable sounds could be heard, faint whispers, footsteps echoing in the empty halls, and even the faint sound of a woman's voice singing, as though she were rehearsing for a performance. One night, the opera house's janitor, an elderly man who had worked there for many years, was cleaning the stage after hours when he heard a woman's voice calling out to him. He turned around, expecting to see a fellow worker, but found the stage completely empty. The voice was clear and distinct, and it sent a chill down his spine. When he tried to leave, the door to the backstage area slammed shut, trapping him inside for several minutes before finally opening on its own. The janitor, shaken and pale, told his colleagues the next day that he was certain the voice had belonged to Li Mei. Others who worked at the opera house began to notice similar occurrences, doors opening and closing on their own, strange shadows moving in the corners of the stage, and a persistent feeling that someone was watching them, even when no one else was around. Over the years, more and more people came forward with eerie encounters at the old Shanghai Opera House. A group of tourists who visited the theater reported hearing footsteps echoing in the empty theater after hours, even though they were the only ones inside. They claimed they saw a figure in the balcony, watching them silently, but when they went to investigate, no one was there. Another visitor reported feeling an intense coldness wash over them as they stood near the stage, as if something, or someone, was brushing past them. Others have reported strange apparitions, seeing a figure in the reflection of mirrors or windows, a pale woman in a costume, who would vanish when they turned to look. Perhaps the most unsettling experience came from a performance that was being held at the theater many years later. A young actress was preparing to take the stage for her big debut in a new play. Backstage, she felt nervous but excited for her first performance in such a historic and famous theater. As she stood near the dressing room, she felt a sudden and inexplicable sense of dread. She looked in the mirror, and for a brief moment, she saw the reflection of a woman standing behind her, dressed in an elegant gown, her face obscured by shadow. When the actress turned around, no one was there. The experience left her terrified, and she later claimed that the woman in the mirror had looked eerily familiar, almost like a ghostly version of Li Mei herself. As the years passed, the old Shanghai Opera House fell into disrepair, its once glorious stage left unused. However, the stories of Li Mei's ghost continued to circulate. Some people believed that her spirit could not rest, trapped in the place where she had died so tragically. Others suggested that the theater itself was cursed, haunted by the restless energy of a life cut short. No matter the explanation, the eerie occurrences persisted, and the ghostly presence of the young actress seemed to linger in the theater, as if waiting for her final curtain call. Today, the old Shanghai Opera House stands as a haunting reminder of the city's cultural past, its walls echoing with the whispers of a tragic history. Whether it is truly haunted by the ghost of Li Mei, or whether the stories are simply the result of imagination and superstition, one thing is certain. The spirit of the opera house lives on, and the ghost of the actress who died so unexpectedly continues to haunt its halls. For those brave enough to visit, the mysteries of the old Shanghai Opera House remain, just beyond the stage, waiting to be discovered. The ocean was calm on December 4, 1872, when the British brig Dei Gratia spotted a ship drifting aimlessly in the Atlantic Ocean. Captain David Morehouse peered through his spyglass, recognizing the vessel as the Mary Celeste, a brigantine he knew had departed from New York City a month earlier. The ship's sails fluttered in the wind, and it appeared seaworthy, but something was off. There was no sign of life aboard. Morehouse ordered his crew to approach the vessel. As they drew closer, an unsettling stillness surrounded the Mary Celeste, as if the sea itself held its breath. When the crew of the Dei Gratia finally boarded, they were met with an eerie sight that would perplex historians and sailors for centuries to come. The Mary Celeste had departed New York on November 7, 1872, bound for Genoa, Italy, carrying a cargo of 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol. Commanding the ship was Captain Benjamin Briggs, a respected and experienced sailor. He was joined by his wife, Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, and a crew of 7. The crew was handpicked by Briggs, all seasoned mariners. By all accounts, the voyage began without incident. But something went horribly wrong. When the Dei Gratia crew explored the Mary Celeste, they found the ship eerily deserted. The lifeboat was missing, and the ship's logbook lay open in the captain's quarters, the last entry dated November 25. The entry placed the ship near the Azores, but nothing in the log hinted at any distress. The cargo hold was largely intact, with only 9 barrels of alcohol found empty. The crew's belongings, including valuables like pipes and clothing, were undisturbed. The ship's provisions were plentiful, enough to last 6 months. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no indication of violence. The ship was seaworthy, though it carried some water in the bilge, normal for a vessel of its size. Theories about the fate of the crew began to circulate almost immediately. One popular idea was that the crew abandoned ship in a panic, fearing an explosion from leaking alcohol fumes. But this theory had flaws. Why would the entire crew, including the captain's family, leave a perfectly good ship? And where had they gone? Another theory involved piracy. Yet, nothing was stolen, and there were no signs of a struggle. Some speculated about mutiny, but again, the lack of any physical evidence made this unlikely. The Mary Celeste's mystery took on a more sinister edge as people began to suggest supernatural explanations. Some whispered that the ship had been cursed or that the crew had fallen victim to sea monsters. Others believed they had been abducted by aliens, drawn into the mysteries of the deep. Further investigations revealed strange details. The ship's pump was found disassembled, which might suggest the crew thought the ship was taking on water. But even so, the Mary Celeste was far from sinking. Stranger still, the ship's navigation instruments were missing, as if the crew had prepared for evacuation. The most chilling clue, however, was what wasn't found. No lifeboat, no bodies, no debris. It was as though the crew had simply vanished into thin air. Over the years, maritime experts have revisited the case. Some suggest that a rogue wave, waterspout, or sudden weather event forced the crew to abandon ship temporarily, only for them to be lost at sea. Others believe the crew may have been overcome by fumes from the alcohol, leading to disorientation and poor decisions. But none of these theories fully explain the strange calmness of the ship, the intact cargo, or the complete absence of any sign of life. The Mary Celeste became a ghost story in every sense of the word. Writers like Arthur Conan Doyle embellished the tale, adding dramatic and fictional elements that only deepened the mystery. Yet, even without these embellishments, the truth is eerie enough. The ship was eventually salvaged and returned to service, but its reputation followed it like a shadow. Sailors whispered that it was cursed, and its later voyages were plagued by accidents and misfortune. In 1885, the Mary Celeste met its end when it was deliberately wrecked off the coast of Haiti as part of an insurance fraud scheme. Its final resting place remains undiscovered, adding another layer of mystery to its legacy. To this day, the story of the Mary Celeste lingers in maritime lore, a chilling reminder of the ocean's power and secrets. It's a tale of a ship adrift on a vast, empty sea, carrying with it an unanswered question. What happened to Captain Briggs, his family, and his crew? Some sailors claim that on quiet nights, if you're sailing near the Azores, you can still see a ghostly brigantine gliding silently across the water. Its sails are full, its deck is empty, and its course is forever unknown. The Mary Celeste, they say, is still searching for answers, for its crew, for salvation. And perhaps it always will be. Poveglia Island, located just a short distance from Venice, Italy, has long been known as one of the most haunted and eerie places in the world. Once a quarantine station for plague victims and later a mental asylum, the island carries with it a dark and tragic history. Visitors to Poveglia report strange occurrences, ghostly apparitions, and an overwhelming sense of dread that seems to linger in the very air. The history of Poveglia Island is not only macabre but deeply unsettling, and it is a place where the past refuses to stay buried. The story of Poveglia Island begins in the 14th century, when the Black Death swept through Europe. Venice, a major trading hub, was one of the hardest-hit regions, and the city's authorities had to take drastic measures to prevent the spread of the plague. In 1379, Poveglia Island was chosen as a quarantine station for plague victims. It became a place where the sick, the dying, and the dead were sent to rot away in isolation. The island was used to contain the spread of disease, and over the centuries, thousands of people were sent there, many of whom never left. The number of deaths on Poveglia Island is staggering. It is estimated that over 100,000 people died there, and their bodies were often burned in large pyres to prevent further contagion. The island became a macabre cemetery, a place where people died in misery and were left to rot without proper burial. The air was thick with the stench of death, and the island was left to fester as a symbol of human suffering. In the 19th century, Poveglia Island's role took a more disturbing turn when it became home to an asylum for the mentally ill. It was here that the island's darkest secrets were truly brought to light. The asylum was known for its brutal conditions, and many patients were subjected to cruel and inhumane treatments. Most notably, it is said that the head physician at the asylum, a man named Dr. Giovanni, performed horrific experiments on the patients. These included lobotomies and other forms of medical torture, all in the name of treatment. The rumors surrounding Dr. Giovanni's actions on the island are horrifying. Some believe he was driven mad by the spirits of the plague victims and patients who died there. According to legend, after years of performing these cruel experiments, he went mad himself. One day, he supposedly leapt from the top of the bell tower on the island, either driven to suicide by his guilt or killed by the restless spirits that had tormented him. His death added another layer of darkness to the already cursed reputation of the island. Today, Poveglia Island is abandoned, with no inhabitants or visitors allowed without special permission. However, it remains one of the most infamous haunted locations in the world. The spirits of the plague victims and the mental patients who perished there are believed to haunt the island to this day, trapped in a never-ending cycle of pain and suffering. Those brave enough to visit Poveglia Island have reported a variety of chilling experiences. The most commonly reported phenomenon is a strange, oppressive feeling of unease that washes over visitors as soon as they step onto the island. The air is thick with a sense of foreboding, and many people describe feeling as though they are being watched. Some even claim to hear whispering voices carried on the wind, though no one is around. The bell tower, which stands as a haunting reminder of the island's dark past, is often the focal point of paranormal activity. Several ghost hunters who have visited Poveglia Island claim to have felt an overwhelming presence near the tower. One visitor described a feeling of being pulled toward the tower, only to be overcome by an unexplainable sense of terror as they got closer. Others have reported hearing eerie sounds coming from the bell tower, like distant screams or wailing, as though the spirits of the past are still trapped there. Perhaps the most disturbing accounts come from those who have experienced ghostly apparitions. Some visitors claim to have seen shadowy figures wandering the island, especially near the remains of the old asylum. These figures are often described as pale, hollow-eyed, and dressed in ragged clothing, much like the people who lived and died there. The ghostly figures seem to move quickly and erratically, vanishing into the shadows before they can be fully seen. In particular, many have reported encountering the ghostly apparition of a woman, possibly a nurse or one of the patients, who is said to appear near the ruins of the asylum. She is often seen wandering the grounds, her face obscured by long, dark hair, her movements slow and deliberate. Some visitors have described her as reaching out to them, as if trying to communicate, while others have felt an icy coldness in the air as she passes by. Despite its abandonment, Poveglia Island's dark legacy continues to attract those with an interest in the supernatural. The island is often cited as one of the most haunted locations in the world, and countless ghost hunters and thrill seekers have visited, hoping to encounter the restless spirits that are said to dwell there. But while some have left with stories of strange occurrences, others report an overwhelming sense of dread that lingers long after they've left the island. The cursed reputation of Poveglia Island is tied to the suffering and death that has taken place there. The spirits of the plague victims, who were sent to the island to die alone, and the mental patients who were tortured in the asylum, are believed to haunt the island, unable to find peace. The brutal medical experiments, the suicides, and the tragic deaths all contribute to the island's haunting, creating a sense of spiritual unrest that persists even after centuries. Today, the island is off limits to the public, but it still captures the imagination of those who are fascinated by its dark past. Despite its haunting reputation, the island has become a tourist attraction for those looking to uncover its secrets. But whether or not the spirits of Poveglia Island will ever find peace remains an open question. The island's tragic history has left its mark on the land, and the echoes of those who suffered there continue to reverberate through the decades, reminding us of the horror that took place on this forsaken island. For those who dare to visit Poveglia Island, the ghosts of the past are not just stories. They are very real, and their presence can still be felt in the cold wind that blows across the desolate land. The ghosts of the plague victims, the patients, and the tormented souls who died in isolation still roam the island, forever trapped in the memory of their suffering. And perhaps, for as long as the island stands, so too will the spirits that haunt it, waiting for the day when they can finally rest in peace. Manila, the bustling capital of the Philippines, is a city of sharp contrasts. modern skyscrapers sitting side by side with crumbling colonial-era buildings, and vibrant street life set against quiet, eerie alleys. While the city's busy streets and lively markets seem full of life during the day, when the sun sets and darkness settles in, a different, far more unsettling presence is said to haunt the shadows. For years, rumors have persisted about strange figures known as the shadow people. These are shadowy, human-like forms that are said to appear in the dark corners of the city, often in alleyways, near abandoned buildings, or on quiet, empty streets. People who have encountered them describe the figures as silhouettes, typically blacker than the surrounding darkness, with no distinct facial features or details. They are often seen out of the corner of the eye, flickering just before they vanish as quickly as they appear. While many dismiss these encounters as tricks of the mind or mere urban legends, there are countless reports from people who claim to have seen these figures in the most unlikely places. One recurring pattern in the stories is that the shadow people seem to avoid direct contact with anyone. They appear, lingering in the background, only to vanish when someone tries to approach them. For some, the presence of these figures fills them with a sense of dread, and others feel an overwhelming compulsion to look away as if the shadows are something that should not be acknowledged. The shadow people are not a new phenomenon in Manila. They are deeply tied to local folklore and beliefs. Many locals believe that the figures are the restless spirits of the dead, wandering the streets in search of peace. In Philippine mythology, there are countless stories of vengeful spirits, ghosts, and creatures that roam in the dark, and the shadow people are thought to be linked to these entities. Some stories suggest that these shadows are souls who were unable to find rest or have been cursed to wander in the afterlife. Others believe the shadow people are manifestations of ancient spirits tied to the land. The Philippines has a long history of indigenous beliefs, and some local legends suggest that the shadow figures are the guardians of ancient places, like old ruins or sacred grounds. These spirits are said to protect these areas, sometimes in a sinister manner, warding off anyone who tries to encroach on their domain. The dark, foreboding alleys and old, dilapidated buildings in Manila are often seen as places where these spirits linger, waiting for intruders. In recent years, the reports of shadow people in Manila have grown more frequent. People claim to have seen them not just in the darkened corners of the city's old districts but in more public places too. There are accounts of people encountering shadow figures near famous landmarks like the Rizal Park, or even outside shopping malls long after closing time. The most chilling sightings seem to occur in the dead of night, when the city's usual noise fades away, leaving only the echo of footsteps and the rustle of wind. Some say the figures seem to follow them as they walk home, glimpsed in alleyways or behind corners, only to disappear when they turn to face them. In some cases, people have reported hearing whispers or faint sounds, as though the figures were communicating, but no one is ever close enough to hear what they're saying. There are also stories of individuals experiencing a sudden drop in temperature when near the shadow people, accompanied by an overwhelming feeling of unease or fear. While many skeptics claim that these sightings are simply the result of overactive imaginations, the sheer number of accounts has given rise to supernatural theories. Some believe that the shadow people are connected to a darker, more sinister force, perhaps an ancient curse that haunts the city or a result of a disturbance in the spiritual balance. In Filipino culture, it is believed that spirits often linger in places where violent events have occurred. The shadow people may be a manifestation of these troubled souls, trapped in a cycle of restlessness and unable to move on. Another theory suggests that the shadow people are a form of elemental spirit, a type of supernatural being that exists on a different plane of reality. According to this theory, the shadow figures are not necessarily human spirits but entities from a realm outside our own. These beings may be linked to the city's ancient history, emerging from the shadows of Manila's colonial past or even from the more distant, pre-colonial era. One particular story that has stuck with locals is that of a woman named Maria, who was walking home late one night after visiting friends in Manila's old district. As she passed a narrow alley near the edge of the district, she noticed a dark shape lingering in the corner of her eye. At first, she thought it was just the shadow of a lamppost or a street vendor's cart. But as she drew closer, the shape didn't move, it stood perfectly still, almost too still. As she tried to walk past, Maria felt a cold chill run down her spine, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She stopped in her tracks, and the figure seemed to shift, its outline becoming more defined. It was humanoid, but its edges were blurred, as if it was somehow bleeding into the night. Maria's heart raced, and instinctively, she turned to flee. But as she ran, she could hear the soft, almost imperceptible sound of footsteps following her, growing louder and closer. When she reached a well-lit street, she glanced back, but the shadow was gone. Maria, terrified but unable to explain what had happened, told a friend about the experience the next day. Her friend, an old local, quietly nodded. "That's the spirit of the restless," she said. "They've been walking these streets for years, looking for peace." The story of Maria is far from unique. There are countless others, each with its own variation of the shadowy figures that haunt Manila's dark corners. Whether they are restless spirits, elemental beings, or something else entirely, the shadow people of Manila remain an unsettling presence in the city. Their haunting appearances, the whispers in the dark, and the chilling feeling they leave behind have made them an enduring part of the city's eerie folklore. As long as there are stories of people who've walked too close to the shadows and felt their cold, unseen hands, Manila's haunting mystery will continue to live on.